Today on The Black Hole, we're going to be talking about the so-called Jason Bourne Quadrilogy. The Bourne Identity, the Bourne Supremacy, the Bourne Ultimatum, and finally the Bourne Legacy, the most recent entry into the franchise. The first in the celebrated Jason Bourne franchise, in hindsight, feels almost like a different affair to the ensuing movies. The Bourne Identity has very much a beginning, middle and end to a story that has expanded significantly over time, and that's the most surprising thing looking back, how closed it all ties up to be. Along the way, Doug Liman delivers a multitude of well-executed action set pieces, backed up by an intriguing narrative and a dynamic everyman meets action hero performance by Matt Damon. Identity is probably the closest to Robert Ludlum's source material, the adaptation subsequently barely touching what actually formed his novels, but the story here remains Damon's amnesiac assassin steadily coming to learn of his past. Damon plays him well, underplays Bourne almost to a point he's relatable, despite his particular set of skills. It makes him very likeable in the face of him being a killer, and a good one at that. His dynamic with Franca Potente's Marie, in the wrong place at the wrong time, is probably the weak link, as they don't have that much chemistry, but it provides Bourne an emotional through line in what could have been a very mechanical chase thriller. Luckily, Lyman's direction puts paid to that. It's tight, snappy, very well constructed, and never too over the top, building a very real world around Bourne with terrific shades of 1970s-esque conspiracy thriller movies. Chris Cooper and Brian Cox beautifully obtuse and crafty as Bourne's corrupt CIA bosses, that keep Bourne from being a superhero and drips the movie in stylised atmosphere. A stronger start to the franchise than people perhaps remember then, the Bourne Identity benefits from being a controlled story that merely leaves the door open for what's to come, without leaving us dangling. A terrific performance by Matt Damon, redefining him as an action star, and Doug Liman's strongest direction yet, it's a shame he didn't return for sequels, make this perhaps the defining action movie of the last decade, and if not the best of its franchise, then a strong start. If you watch The Bourne Identity, you realise it didn't need a sequel. It was constructed to exist as a told story, yet keep that door open to explore the mystery surrounding amnesiac assassin Jason Bourne further. The Bourne Supremacy succeeds in being a superior sequel to a very good original by taking what we already had and logically expanding it outward to create a more compelling backstory than we might have imagined. Though directed with a different verve and pace by Paul Greengrass, it takes everything Identity did right and does it with more depth, intelligence and excitement. Divisive is almost putting it mildly when it comes to Greengrass's direction, all fast-cutting, steady-cam, jerky action, especially when it comes to set pieces. But I feel it perfectly suits Bourne's cold, detached, ruthless world, even better than Doug Liman's solid approach did. Greengrass chooses here to deepen not just Bourne's past, but also the mechanism of his creation. In Identity, the CIA were mercurial and shifty, but we never got under the skin of how they operate. But here, Greengrass and Tony Gilroy's skillful writing do, primarily through Joan Allen's Ice Maiden agent Pamela Landy, a prism to view the murky intelligence world as they struggle to clean up their mistakes. Yet there also manages to be a structured, emotional story for Bourne amidst the cat and mouse element, necessary as Matt Damon, even better here as Bourne, has very little dialogue in comparison to anyone else, central and driving the story with actions rather than words. But the emotional through line of his first Treadstone killing provides a logical, conclusive narrative amidst the wider mythos in play. The scenery chomping comes to greats such as Brian Cox, expanding wonderfully on his Identity role, while extra danger comes in the form of a ruthless Karl Urban as a Russian version of Bourne essentially, thrown in with Damon with some thrilling action beats, primarily a climactic Moscow car chase that deserves to be regarded up there with the best thanks to Greengrass's mercilessly electric staging. Supremacy is even better than I remember. Lean running time, a punchy and intelligent narrative you'll need to pay attention to throughout, some superb execution of action beats, and yet again a strong performance by Damon, anchoring a story that begins to expand without ever undermining how it all began. A truly great sequel. The climactic beat of the Jason Bourne saga, if not the franchise it spawned, delivers every bit of the punch and sense of open-ended closure most people would have wished for the end of the story. The Bourne Ultimatum takes the baton Supremacy laid down both in narrative and style and runs with them. And if the result isn't quite as effective, it's only marginally less so. It feels a little less layered and complex as last time, moving a little more back to the style of Identity for the finish. This is much more of a chase thriller, and though Bourne once again engages in some thrilling gambits one step ahead of the corrupt CIA, it frequently feels like Supremacy covered this before, with better characters too. David Strathairn is perfectly oily as Noah Bosun, but he's hollow and quite dumb on many occasions as the plot serves. Plus the unit around him are frequently annoying. No match for Joan Allen, who brings a much needed shade of grey as Pamela Landy once again, as the CIA threatens to be overcome by all too obvious villainy. Paul Greengrass's movie doesn't shine on that side of the fence, but it glows when he's out and about with Bourne, executing some of the finest set pieces in the series with a tense Waterloo setup and a thrilling extended chase through Tangier, Greengrass mixing it up with resolute car chases, scraps, and indeed parallax view style face-offs. Once again too, Matt Damon is the rock at the heart. He owns Bourne now, doing as much with an action as many heroes need a page of dialogue to do, while his dynamic with Julia Stiles' Nikki is well underplayed and one of the series' most enjoyable. It all comes to a head in the Bourne Ultimatum in stylish, thrilling, and at times quite epic fashion. Greengrass struggles to top the impact he made on the franchise with the Supremacy, but in a way he's still making that film an ultimatum. They can rightly be considered one long story to some extent. As with Identity, it locks things off while opening enough doors for Legacy, but as a piece of work it's excellent, intelligent excitement, and the climax of a superb cinematic trilogy. Where do I begin with the Bourne legacy? I'll just come right out and say it. This film bored the hell out of me. Let's just process that for a second. A Bourne film, arguably the defining action franchise of the last 10 years, almost put me to sleep within the first 30 minutes. Lord above, how? How did Tony Gilroy, stepping up behind the camera instead of simply behind the typewriter, continue this most pulse-pounding, intelligent and frenetic series with a leaden, plodding, shockingly plotted drama? Not even a thriller, let's get that very clear. The truth is, I really don't know. I only know I came out of that cinema stunned at how poor what I just saw was in relation to the trilogy that came before it. Two people who cannot be possibly blamed for this, though, are Jeremy Renner or Rachel Weisz, in the lead roles of burned agent Aaron Cross and in danger scientist Marta Shearing. Weisz has proven herself many times to be a quality actress, and she portrays an intelligent yet terrified woman very well. Renner is fast carving himself a niche as the newest thinking man's action hero, capable of reaching subtext beyond the muscle flexing, and this role gives him the exposure he needed after limited, if well played, turns in The Avengers and Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. Don't blame them, they did great with what they had. Don't even really blame the high quality supporting cast. Gruff old timers like Stacey Keach, great to see him in a proper role, or Scott Glenn. Solid character actors like Dennis Boutsikaris or Jelko Ivanek, or even Edward Norton, whose talked up villain role is little more than him talking cryptically or barking orders in rooms, which Joan Allen and David Strathairn did better in 2 movies already. No, this ain't their fault. I'm sorry, Mr. Gilroy, but the buck stops with you here, because what you gave these guys was very little. Not since the first Expendables movie have I sat through a plot as dull as I did here. It's well known Gilroy was no fan of Paul Greengrass's frenetic pace on Supremacy and Ultimatum, but you know what, Tony? It worked a treat. Gilroy goes the exact other way here, choosing instead to wrap an action movie around a conspiracy drama that is nowhere near as interesting as he thinks it is. The Bourne world is expanded here as promised, weaved into Ultimatum, awkwardly I might add. Yet oddly enough, details about hardwiring, pills, secret science, all drag the plot for an excruciating first 45 minutes when nothing of interest happens. Seriously, it's just talking, in rooms, about stuff we already know, or guessed. Gilroy then throws a well-executed set piece in a lab and a house to throw us off, and then he's back to snail's pace, or rehashing the CIA 2 steps behind chase element the last 3 films did with so much more urgency and excitement. Then when we reach another well-crafted, if a bit overlong, action beat that indicates we're heading somewhere, the film ends. Honestly, it just stops. The briefest of tie-ups, a sequel setting as you could possibly imagine, and we're out. I almost said, that's it? In my seat, as Extreme Ways by Moby started playing for the 4th time. Not that I don't like that song. By far and away my first true disappointment of the year, given how much I'd been looking forward to it. The Bourne Legacy is technically well put together. It has 2 fine actors in the leads, playing characters who are more interesting because of them, supported by a strong ensemble, and yes, 2 or 3 moments are from a better movie. Yet Tony Gilroy, if by some miracle you read this, please stay behind the script only for the next one. Your worthy, dragging direction of average material, poor editing and frankly woeful sense of plotting, plus your half-hour too long running time, sank this much anticipated sequel. Phone Paul Greengrass for the next one. He knew what he was doing.